The Road to the American Revolution, Part 2. In the first video we explored how the British colonies went from being under the British Empire to being independent and part of the USA. So, what else led to the American Revolution? In this video, we're going to explore the topics the Boston Massacre, the Boston Tea Party, and the Intolerable Acts, among other things. Now let's recap and explore some things that led to the American Revolution. Firstly, there was the Proclamation of 1763, where the colonists were not allowed to explore the new lands. Next came the Quartering Act, where British soldiers were put in people's homes and colonists were forced to house them. Then came the Stamp Act, which was a tax on all kinds of paper products. This made the colonists super mad, because they didn't have representation in Parliament. The Stamp Act was successfully repealed, which meant that it was cancelled by the British government. This was partly due to the Sons of Liberty. They were a protest group formed by Sam Adams and Paul Revere. Next came the Townshend Acts. This was an attempt by the British to put more taxes on different products. If you haven't done so already, this is a good opportunity to pause the video so you can take down notes from the previous video. One of the biggest issues the colonists faced was that they didn't have representation in Parliament, and the British were finding new ways to make them pay for the French and Indian War. We finished the previous video on the Townshend Acts. They were acts that were meant to tax the British colonists on things like tea, paint, iron, glass, and porcelain, among other things. The Townshend Acts were repealed, but they kept the tax on tea just to show that they could. Things were calm for a while, but then in 1770, the Boston Massacre occurred. In Boston, it seemed like there were British soldiers everywhere. The story goes that a lone soldier was on duty when some men and boys started taunting him. More soldiers arrived. The crowd was throwing snowballs. Some had rocks inside them. That night, 5 colonists died, including the first African American, Crispus Attucks. After this, Paul Revere, a Sons of Liberty, and a silversmith made a copper engraving of the event. No one's quite sure if he was there or not. But after this, the people became frustrated at the British, and it became a new reason to be distrustful of the British. A few days later, half the city of Boston turned out for the funeral of the 5 men killed. After this, the Committees of Correspondence was formed. This was a way for the colonists to keep track of the different things that the British were doing to violate their rights. It also brought the men on horseback would send messages between the big cities. During this time, the British colonists were struggling with the question, should we be loyal to Great Britain or seek independence? Later in 1773, the British sought to reduce the price of tea in order to encourage the colonists to buy it again, but they kept the tax on it. But instead, the British colonists decided to boycott it and smuggled their tea in from the Dutch instead. Even though the price of tea was now reduced significantly, the British colonists were still refusing to buy it. This led to one of the most infamous events in history, the Boston Tea Party. The Sons of Liberty were now going as far as refusing to let ships dock, and they wouldn't let them unload their tea. Their next step had huge consequences. They dressed as Native Americans. They rowed out to 3 ships, the Dartmouth, the Eleanor, and the Beaver, in Boston's harbor. There they dumped all of the tea, 342 chests of tea, valued at over $1.7 million in modern currency. This became known as the Boston Tea Party. The British responded with the Intolerable Acts, also known as the Coercive Acts. As a punishment for the Boston Tea Party, the self-government of Massachusetts was removed. The port was shut down until the tea would be replaced. And the governor of Massachusetts was replaced with a man who was loyal to Great Britain named General Thomas Gage. General Gage also restricted town meetings in order to restrict people from gathering. And where did they put all the soldiers? You guessed it, they used the Quartering Act to put them in people's houses. So what did the Intolerable Acts do? They shut down Boston's port until the lost tea was paid for, and they also replaced the governor and shut down the Massachusetts government. Next came the First Continental Congress, where representatives from each colony gathered together in Philadelphia. During this time, the British had full control of Boston. At the meeting were some famous people. George Washington, Patrick Henry, and Thomas Jefferson represented Virginia, Sam Adams and John Adams represented Massachusetts, and John Jay represented New York. These faces may be familiar because George Washington was the first president, John Adams was the second president, and Thomas Jefferson was the third president of the United States. What did they do there? They agreed to stop all trade until Britain repealed the Intolerable Acts. The shot heard round the world. Meanwhile in Boston, militia groups started to form. Sam Adams and John Hancock, the Sons of Liberty, were hiding in Lexington. And there were a number of supplies and weapons hidden in Concord. General Gage decided to gather his troops in order to capture both at the same time. Paul Revere also alerted the colonists that the British were coming. When the British arrived in Lexington, they found John Hancock and Sam Adams had already escaped, but a militia formed for the first time against the British. It quickly dispersed, and the British moved on to Concord. Again, another militia formed, and the first shots of the American Revolution were fired here at Concord, Massachusetts. Surprisingly, the British turned around and began to flee back to Boston, where the militia pursued them the whole way, often shooting redcoats in the back because they were easy targets. The American Revolution had now begun. Let's recap with the main events that led to the American Revolution. The Proclamation of 1763, the Quartering Act of 1765, the Stamp Act of 1765. The Sons of Liberty are formed. The Townshend Act, 1767. The Boston Massacre, 1770. The Boston Tea Party, 1773. The Intolerable Acts, also known as the Coercive Acts, 1774. The First Continental Congress, Lexington and Concord.